Okay, good morning to all. 10:15, I like to start on time. This is part A or part one of a two-part executive boot camp. I hope that's the right room you're in. My name is Barton Goldenberg. I'm your speaker for. They're actually connected. The first one I'm going to talk more at a high level, why it's important that your companies thrive in what I call the digital deluge. And then in the second part, I'm going to drop down into why CRM is such a pervasive component of the digital deluge. So they're kind of connected. First one at the bigger picture, second one diving down into the CRM component. It's a pleasure to be here. I welcome you to my hometown. It's one of the few times I have an opportunity. I live in Bethesda, Maryland, all of 3 miles up the road. I'm chairman, founder of this conference back in the early, I think it was about 2010 or something. And I chaired it for several years before I handed it over to Paul. So we're all just hoping you'll have a good time. You ask lots of questions. You speak to the people with the badges that are either speakers or members of Information Today. Whatever we can do to make your time a successful time is what's on our minds. I started in this industry in 1985. That's 32 years ago. We have the same mission, the same thrust, and that is to help companies apply processes and technology to drive more customer intimacy, better customer engagement, et cetera. And I've had the honor of working with a number of very important leading companies, writing books, et cetera. And all I want to do in the next couple of hours is to share some of those stories with you. I find that the best way to learn. If it's important to you, I've also handed out a book as a way of thanking you. That's my latest book called, this one is called Social CRM, The Ultimate Guide to Social CRM. And as I'll explain later on, I'm in the process of writing my fourth book, and this is on the topic of the digital deluge, or what I call the delighted customer strategy. So that's just a compliment from me. If you'd like, I'm happy to autograph or sign those. We have a booth downstairs, and I'm happy to do it there. Okay, so the company itself works with both private, public, and not-for-profit organizations to give briefings on things like CRM or social media or e-commerce or emerging technology or the digital deluge. We'll come in and assess how well you're doing that inside the company. And then we'll also help create the strategy and implement the strategy to make that happen. And we've done that for all of the companies I'm about to show you, including both on the non-manufacturing side, so services industry, as well as on the manufacturing side. And I put these up not because they're big names and they're impressive, but because they're indicative of companies that have taken the plunge into this digital deluge. Companies that have said, it's important enough to get this right. And I think the only way at this point, because there's not enough books or classes that are available, is to really share stories with you. So it's my intention to take customers, a variety of these different areas, and share those stories with you. And again, if you want to learn more, happy to carry on the dialogue in our booth number 409, which is downstairs on the exhibition floor. Okay, thriving in the digital deluge. That's the topic for today, and as Bob Fernicky's alluded to you, the hashtag is CRM Evolution. I'd recommend you use that if you're tweeting. So the digital deluge, what is it? How pervasive is it? Is it important, et cetera? And I come back, for me anyhow, and I really like to refer to the digital deluge as a digital fire hose. So what I mean by a digital fire hose is information is coming from you from a variety of different sources every day, as Jerry McGovern pointed out earlier this morning, faster, quicker, et cetera. And we as businessmen and women, we have to ask ourselves a very fundamental question. How do I deal with this quantity of data? But I also have to ask more fundamental questions. Which of this data is relevant to me? Because I can't handle it all, but I can handle that which is relevant to me. And that which is relevant to me should be what is your customer saying to you. And so part of your job is to be a good listener and understand what is important to them. So as I look at it, and I'm not going to go through the statistics, but I'll just make a couple of observations. There are more tweets now than there are books in the world. There are more texts that were done on a daily basis than there are toothbrushes in the world. So we just kind of put that into perspective. You ask yourself, what am I to do with all of this information? And it's a very simple goal, and it's in blue, and that is capture and win your customers who are also awash in this digital sea. And I sit back and ask, well, Is this digital deluge here to stay? And you remember what Jerry said this morning, it's here because Google is understanding what was 20 seconds and 9 seconds and 5 seconds and 1.3 seconds. It's getting faster and more of it. And there are actually two drivers behind the digital deluge that one has to take account of. One is what I'd like to call the now customer. And those are the 16 to 18-year-olds, and I've got two of them as teenagers who absolutely believe that the world started and ended with Google. They buy digitally, and they're at the absolute infancy of that revolution. I was at my niece's, it was a party for her, she's 13. She had the audacity to ask me, Uncle Bart, she said, when you were my age, what was your favorite app? And I proceeded, of course, to tell her, sweetheart, we didn't have apps when I was your age. But that's one of the drivers, and these kids aren't going away, and there's lots of them. It's just the way they like to do business. The second driver behind the digital deluge is that of the personal computer, better known as a smartphone today, that sits in your pocket, the pocket PC. 95% of all knowledge workers have a smartphone. I don't need to tell you how important that is, but what I can conclude is that neither the now customer nor the pocket PC, better known as the smartphone, is going away anytime soon, which shouldn't surprise you that 77% of all businesses now state that digital transformation is their top strategic priority. So you got to nail this. This is not a nice to have, this is a need to have, and what I'd like to do is ask you the question that I ask myself all the time, and that is there a recipe to thrive in the digital deluge? And I sit back and I look at companies, I happen to do that for enjoyment. I look at the borders of this world who really lost their way in the whole digital deluge. And I look on the other side of the spectrum to an Amazon that's leading the way in the digital deluge. And I ask myself, why? Why did one get it and one didn't get it? I look at companies like Illy. How many of you drink Illy coffee? Please raise your hands. Okay, so there's a company I know very well, finding their way in the digital deluge, still not segmenting customers they need to, or targeting specific messaging or media and so forth. On the one side, learning their way, and on the other side we have Coca-Cola, which is a good example of a company that really has mastered the digital deluge. I'll give you a couple of recent stats that I just picked up from them. More than 20,000 registered consumers. Starting in 2015, they took a corporate decision that they had to lead in the digital space. They activated their CRM database for personalized one-to-one target marketing across digital media, including Google and Facebook and Twitter and many other marketing platforms that I'm going to talk to you about. So again, I ask the question, why is that Coca-Cola got it and another soft drink company, Illy, simply hasn't found their way? Is there a recipe? And I humbly submit to you there is a recipe, and I'm going to share that recipe with you over the next 40 or so minutes, and then we can talk about it during the break and during the conference. So it all starts out, well, there's three components I should mention to this recipe. Ingredient one, a strategic ingredient, and I'm going to go over these individually. Ingredient number two, a tactical component that I call closed-looped CRM. And ingredient number three, some of the challenges that are brought on by a lack of getting the people, process, technology mix right. And again, I'm going to talk about these in more detail as we move forward. Let's start with what I'd like to call the strategic component or the strategic ingredient to surviving and being successful in digital deluge. This used to be called integrated customer-centric strategy. I think that's even the title of this presentation. But I've been thinking about that the last months, and it's wrong. Integrated customer-centric strategy is an internal focus. We are going to be integrated in our customer-centric strategy. But do you think my 16 or 18-year-old kids, or for that matter, your spouses or children or grandchildren, whatever, customers, do you think they care about what you're doing? And the answer is no, they don't. What they care about is being delighted by what you're doing. And so I'm going to call this session not integrated customer-centric strategy, but delighted customer strategy. And it consists, I want to explain this, I'm going to go into great detail in part two of today's presentation, but it's worthy of just thinking about here. It's my humble observation that unless you have a strategic mindset and roadmap in place, you're not going to succeed in thriving in the digital deluge. So what does that strategy look like? It's broken up into three components. The first component is down the bottom, That consists of gathering data and putting it in a way that is useful so that you can then target customers, drive good customer experience, create the journey maps that people talk about. What is that data? There's three components. The first piece is your, what might be called transactional data. It could be ERP systems. It could be point of sale systems. It could be loyalty programs. The second piece of data, if you will, is your CRM system. It has sales information, pipeline, customer service, incident management. It has marketing, campaign management, a whole bunch of information about either what the customer would like or you're doing with the customer and how they're reacting. The third component on the data side is that of third-party data. Now, we know the demographic overlays, as it's called, data overlays from Experian or Acxiom, but there are many, many third-party data providers that really get into specific detail. If you love wine, there's tremendous databases on wine lovers and who are they and what makes them tick and so forth. So the good strategy thinks, we need to take these three pieces of data and bring them into the core concept behind a delighted customer strategy, and that is a holistic customer profile. And the holistic customer profile is a 360-degree view of the customer. It's all that we know about the customer that pulls together these three pieces of data. Now, I'm going to stop for a minute. It's not really the purpose of today, but I want to just talk for a minute about something called identity resolution. How many of you in the room, please raise your hand, know what the new technology of identity resolution is? Please raise your hands. Okay, see, this doesn't surprise me. That's why I said I want to stop for a minute. It's coming out of Silicon Valley. It's companies like LiveRamp. It's companies like Oracle's BlueKai and many others. It's about a year and a half old. It will revolutionize the entire way we do business in the future. And here's what it does. It integrates online and offline data. So I'm going to get into this in a minute, a little bit later on, but I'm a Jaguar fan. I have several old Jaguars. That's what I like to do with my extra cash. And Jaguar knows me because I buy the cars at Jaguar. They service the cars at Jaguar. They know my email and my telephone number. They know all about me offline. When I service the car, whether I have a lease on the car, when does a lease expire, offline. But Bart is a very avid Jaguar fan, and I spend an awful lot of time on social media sites that deal with Jaguar, including Jaguar's social media site and other media sites. I also spend a lot of time on Jaguar's website and other Jaguar websites. And I talk to fellow Jaguar enthusiasts, and we share stories, and I say I'm about to buy a new car, or I don't like this, or I wish they had that, and everybody else does. But Jaguar doesn't know that that's Bart on those websites or Bart on those social media sites, because I don't come in as Barton Goldenberg. I have my own URL that I come into, and it's coming from my home PC or my kid's PC. They don't know who I am. So if I'm going to be effective in selling or marketing or servicing Bart Goldenberg, would I be smart to use offline data only, that which I know about him? Or would I be smart to integrate the online side of Barton with the offline part of Barton? And the ability to integrate offline and online data is the new technology called identity resolution. For those of you that are not familiar with it, you actually are, you just don't realize it. You visit a website, you go to another website, and all of a sudden an ad from the first website just followed you. You know what I'm talking about? So all they're doing is looking at your cookie bouncing around the web, or they're looking at your mobile ID off your cell phone, looking at various web or other sites. And the moment that you're anonymous at that point. You don't have to say who you are. You can spend all the time you want looking around. The moment you authenticate on the web, meaning you go to a sports event and say, I want to buy tickets, or you go to Match.com looking for a date, or certain key sites on the web, then they know, cookie number 106 that's Bart Goldenberg. Wait a minute, 106 is all over the web. That's all Bart Goldenberg. Wait a minute, that Bart Goldenberg is the same as offline Bart Goldenberg, and I can put the information together. Now, there's all kinds of privacy rules that are involved in this, and they're very strict. But rest assured, identity resolution is a tremendously valuable concept that integrates online and offline data and allows your profile to be more complete, to be more seamless. How could you possibly create a customer profile that does not include online behavior of a customer today? Only an ostrich with their head in the sand could consider that approach. So this is the bottom piece of the platform. integrated data offline, online, coming from transactional, CRM, and third party into a profile that I'm going to talk a lot more about a bit later on. Sitting on top of that is your data and listening analytics platform so that I can now look at my profile, cut, sort, stack, segment the various customers and begin to now pass the right products at the right time to the right customers the way they want to in their proper buying window. That's the bottom of it. When I have my data together, I'm going to use the 4 customer engagement pillars or channels to get my product to market. Many of us spend a lot of time in the traditional media pillar. That is face-to-face meetings. It's the telephone. It's emails. It's it could be focus group surveys or focus groups. There's a variety of different traditional medias that we use. Direct mail's another one, and there's nothing wrong with that. But what we have to do in this channel not only is to bring product through there, we have to have our ears open to listen to what the customer says as feedback to those products. Second channel, social media, both private communities, private branded invitation-only social media communities, and public Facebook or Twitter communities. And again, that's a channel to get our messaging out, to get our products understood, but it's also a fantastic channel to listen to our customers so we can learn what's important to them. The third channel, that of e-commerce, whether it's your website, whether it's portals for individual customers, whether it's your search engine capability, whether it's your shopping cart, whether it's next best offer, these are all digital tools that we use inside the e-commerce channel, both to sell, market, and service our products, but equally important to listen to our customers. The fourth channel that I'd like to just bring to your attention is that of emerging technologies. Most of it is the digital apps or mobile apps that most people talk about, but it's much more than that. It's the wearables if you're in the consumer industry. It's the Internet of Things if you're in the B2B community. It's all some of the new technologies around virtual reality and augmented reality, around personalized video, around addressable TV. These are all technologies that allow us to reach our customers with products and services and market effectively and sell effectively and service them effectively. So now the question is, okay, I've got these channels that sit on top of my data. If I'm clever and I've got a strategy in place, I'm listening. I'm not just pushing product through these channels. I'm listening to what the customer says in the private social media community, on my website, what mobile apps they're using at what time and where they're located. And all of that allows me to bring that information down into my profile so I'm a smarter, better listener to my customer and can react appropriately. And then I apply my data analytics layer on the profile and come out with better and better digital media or traditional media offerings. So for example, I listen to somebody on social media sites say, you know, I really wish that they offered so-and-so. Well, that might now become what I'm offering on my e-commerce site. Or I see that people are spending an awful lot of time on a particular area of my website. That might become a topic in my social media community. Or I'm sending out traditional mail and I see people are particularly attracted to something and they're mentioning they really wish it were digital. Well, I might use some emerging technology to address that need. So these channels are no longer siloed. Rather, these channels are integrated. And again, the strategy has to think, how do I then integrate my different channels of listening or my channels of distribution so that I can be a smarter listener and understander of what's important to my customer. If we do this effectively, folks, what that does, it drives better customer acquisition, better customer retention, and customer growth. And that's the strategic component of thriving in the digital deluge. Now, not every company is going to have all of these components. Many of them will have some of them, maybe all of them. They may not all be integrated. They may not all be optimized. But there is a starting point for every one of your companies in thriving in this digital deluge. My feeling is until you have thought this through, what channels do we want to use? Or what channels do we use? What do we want to use? Until we've thought through what data do we gather? What data should we gather? Until you've thought through online or offline data or using identity resolution as a vehicle to bring the two together. Until you've thought through what data and listening platform do I need to put into place so I can understand our customers better and thrive, and allow us to thrive in the digital deluge. I don't know how you can move forward. I always kind of have to start with the big picture roadmap. That's the first ingredient in thriving in the digital deluge. I'd like to move on to the second ingredient in thriving the digital deluge, and that is what I call a closed-loop CRM. And closed loop means exactly what it says. You start at the top, and you'll see we'll come around and end at the top. So there's 5 components in this second ingredient called closed-loop CRM, and the first component is that of a structured, appropriate customer engagement channels. So we could do it the easy way and say, well, Bart, you already talked about that. Those are these 4 channels up here, and you wouldn't be wrong. Or you could be a little more sophisticated in your thinking and say, well, there's all kinds of digital channels that I could use. Some of them are more mature than others. I probably should have a presence at least in the mature ones today and increasingly in the less mature ones, but important ones. So for example, on the maturity side, traditional direct mail, display, all of this would be a way of reaching your customers in your sales and marketing and service efforts. Mature, and you do it today, and it's a channel. You can then go to email and websites and social and search and video, and that's kind of just beginning to hit a certain peak as another way to reach your customers in your sales and marketing efforts. You could start to get a little bit more adventurous in television, premium content publishers. Those are the HBOs or the Netflix or people that package information and get it out to you. Again, not totally the norm of how people do business on the B2B, B2C, or B2B2C front, but increasingly important. And you can then start to move into the Internet of Things or out-of-home technologies or channels. Obviously, you know Internet of Things, devices that are connected to the Internet, whether it's in the, whether it's stockroom, how much stock am I using, whether it's on the machine itself, how quickly is it consuming the products, and so forth. Out-of-pocket, for those of you that are not familiar, or out-of-home for the technology, that's your beacons that are inside stores. Macy uses them to figure out who's there and to make special offers to while you're in the store. That's increasingly digital billboards that know the market that is at that particular location and changes the billboard digitally to address the need of the customer. And again, I'm not saying you're all doing that, but it's just a couple of ways of looking at this all-important need to work within appropriate customer engagement channels. Now, we are who we are. And when you create this recipe, you have to start with what you have. So there's nothing wrong with having some of those or some of these, but we have a position and we have to just know what it is. And we should ask ourselves, because we listen to our customers, what channels do they happen to use frequently? And the only way to know that is to ask the customer. So we spend an enormous amount of time in market research and digital surveys and on not digital surveys to find out where is the customer hanging. Where do they like to buy? Where do they like to market? Receive information from a marketing. Where do they like to receive and ask for service? And if indeed we understand our customers well, what Jerry called a customer obsession this morning, then in fact we will be in a position, even though we may be in only one of these or something today, to plot out the chart for the future. Does that make sense? Okay. So now we have these channels, and it doesn't make a difference what you have today because you're going to move towards what you need tomorrow, but each channel is an opportunity for you to listen, for you to gather structured, relevant data in a structured approach. And I can't emphasize how important that is. We spend an awful lot of time, money, and effort putting product out on the market. We don't spend enough time, money, and effort listening to how the customers are receiving our offering. So I'd like to tell you there's a simple way or a simple structured approach to gather relevant data. I have to tell you that's not totally the case just yet. What I do know is that you need to gather both non-digital offline data and digital online data, and you need to put that together and begin to understand what your customer is looking for. I do know that you need to analyze it for insight, and particularly something that you can action. So I'll give you an example. Ritz-Carlton is owned by Marriott Corporation. Marriott Corporation is one of our customers. It's a wonderful company. Ritz-Carlton had a very unique situation in Las Vegas, Nevada, a couple of years ago. It was a young, newlywed couple that had just got married. They went out to Ritz-Carlton in Las Vegas, and they checked in, and they were very, very excited. They had just been married. This was the first time they were in Las Vegas. And they were tweeting all the way from the moment they left their home in Arkansas to the moment they ended up in Las Vegas. And they entered the hotel, and they greeted them at the desk, and they put them in a very lovely room at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel. Now, for many of you that know Ritz-Carlton, usually most Ritz-Carltons are a little bit antiquated. They look like your grandfather's room. They're beautiful wood paneling and fireplaces. The furniture is lovely, but it's not exactly hip and modern. So these newlyweds got in, the bride tweets, she said, you know, this is wonderful. We saw slot machines at the airport and the hotel. And I mean, it's a nice hotel, but not exactly what I was looking for. But hey, I got my wonderful new hubby. Life is okay. 4 minutes later, Marriott Corporation has an enormous listening tool, picked up that tweet. 2 minutes later, the manager of the front desk of the Ritz-Carlton in Las Vegas was informed, you have a problem in suite 505. And they kind of huddled at the front desk and said, what are we going to do about this? And they made a decision and went upstairs and knocked on suite 505 and said, you know, we've been sitting downstairs thinking about you guys, newlyweds. You know, we're thinking maybe a room that overlooks the strip, that has a jacuzzi, kind of modern. That would be a more appropriate room for you. Would you allow us to move you? The young lady said, of course. I mean, that'd be great. Thank you very much. And they move her and him, and they get to the new suite, beautiful new overlooking the strip, just what she was looking for, and she writes another tweet. She said, you're not going to believe what just happened. It's like they were reading my mind. He came upstairs and moved this room. It's overlooking the strip. It's just what I was looking for. Ritz-Carlton rocks. The right channel, listening, actionable insight. That make sense? Okay, now there's lots of opportunity. We'll tell more stories about this, but I want to get to the third component. So we have these channels, regardless of what they are today, where they will be tomorrow, all giving us potential information about our customer. So what do we do with this data? We have to house it somewhere. And if you remember, again, what Jerry McGovern said this morning, more data or more crap is exactly what he used, is not necessarily better. Relevant data is better. And that brings us up to the holistic customer profile. And I really want to slow down here because it's a core concept, as I've alluded to. You know, I wrote my first article in 1986 on the importance of the customer profile. And what I said was, think of it as a flower, as a daisy. Put the customer or the distributor or whatever may be the appropriate customer in your books in the center of the daisy and create a flower with petals of information. A profile takes 12 to 18 months to build. The petals don't last for life. Information gets old. Like a good horticulturalist, you pull out the dead petals and allow new petals of information to grow. But your job is to create something whereby, as I've said down here, your CRM job starts with a full picture of every customer, their entire story, wants and needs. Because as a businessman or a businesswoman, how in the world can you possibly bring the right product to the right customer, in the right channel, their way, not your way, during their buyer window, if you don't have a clear focus of your customer? And what the customer profile does, it takes you from a blurry picture to something in focus. And I'm astounded at how few companies, still today, 23 years after I wrote that article, 33 years after I wrote, whatever, how few do a good customer profile. So let me talk a little bit deeper. That's what it looks like. That's the flower. That's the customer in the center and the petals of information around the top of it. This is Beneteau. Beneteau makes sailboats and they make motorboats. They go through dealers, so they have a dealer profile to know about the dealers. The dealer then has a customer, so they have a customer profile, call it an end customer, who buys the boats. So they need to have a profile for both. This is not correct. It's a schema. But as you can see, we have lots of different information. How does the dealer or the customer like to be contacted? Any alerts as to opportunities that are in the pipeline, activities, next steps. What have they purchased? What are they worth to us? Any new sales opportunities or quotes that are outstanding? What service have we done? Who do they use for dealer? And voila. We now have that new petal called digital insight. Remember we talked about integration of online and offline data? Now it's integrated into the holistic customer profile. Am I tracking with everybody right now? This is very important because companies have taken the profile even further. This is Blue Shield of California, one of our customers, 3.5 million members. They've got 3 profiles. Why? Well, there's you, the member, or me, and we have certain needs when we buy our health insurance. But you often belong to a company, so they have a lot of information about the employer group that you belong to, so they can sell effectively. And typically you and or the employer group is sold to by what they call a producer or a health insurance broker. And that's now a question of the ability for us to use these profiles to better understand our customers. And I really want to stop and talk for a minute about that profile just because it's so important. So here was the example I used earlier on of Jaguar. They know my purchase data, my service, my dealer data, the leases. But what they don't know is the website behavior or social media. And their goal is to have access to relevant data tied to Barton. Relevant data about Jaguar lovers is meaningless if I'm going to buy the car and they don't know it's me that's buying the car. And in this modern digital world, unless you are integrating online and offline data to thrive in the digital deluge, how can you have that customer in focus? How can you sell effectively? How can you market effectively? How can you service effectively? Is this making sense? David, would you please call the audio guy and have him clean up the mic? It's not working properly. Thank you. Okay, so let's go to the fourth ingredient in our closed-loop CRM. We've got the channels. They're spitting off data. The data is allowing us to go into the customer profile, and now we need to somehow make sense of this data. And it comes in the whole idea of actionable data analytics. And folks, there's no shortage of data, as Jerry McGovern alluded to this morning, but there is a shortage of understanding how to use that data well. So lots of companies use excuses like, well, we just can't get an omni-channel or a total view of the customer. Or they say, you know, and this was a study done by Forrester last year, or beginning part of this year, 46, almost half of them say we lack the ability to integrate digital and offline data, what I'm alluding to. Or 44% say there's too much data. Or 38% says I don't have the technology to manage the data. You know, those are excuses, folks. I don't buy it. I know that there's enough data that is available and data analytics tools to really allow us to take that data and make sense of it. Whether it is effective segmentation with Zumba Fitness, these are all customers, with Zumba Fitness used to better understand when you are a Zumba dancer, how often you go to class, what type of class do you take, do you buy clothes and not buy clothes, do you go to the annual events, the exhibitions and dances? Who are you? Are you a retired teacher? Are you a mom? Are you a guy that is working during the day? You know, who are you? And they begin to really segment effectively using good data analytics tools. Lookalike modeling is something that Giorgio Armani and Coca-Cola do all the time. So I have, this is what my best customers look like. Let me take that data overlay and look at other customers that have 60% of the same attributes and see if in fact I can bring them up to the bigger picture. So Armani, I worked very carefully on this one. Armani, 51% of men buy Giorgio Armani clothes, 49% of women in this country. The big spenders have a very, very concrete footprint as to lifestyle and why they buy Giorgio Armani. And for a long time, Giorgio Armani did not look at customers using data analytics. They looked at them more than anything from the top 20% of money givers, the next 20%, so they brought them into 5 segments based on the dollar value of the customer, which is obviously absolute rubbish. And what was important was to understand who makes up the top 20. And what we did is we looked inside the top 20 and got a very good understanding of their profile and who they were, and then began to overlay that in the next layer down, the 20% below that, and notice that in fact there's lots of people that had similar characteristics but were never marketed to or sold to in the way we sold to the top 20%. So these are called lookalike models. All this stuff exists. Sizing of opportunities at Kraft Foods, we do that all the time. Acquisition modeling, all of these are all, I'm not going to go through them. There's many, many tools to do effective data analytics. And only the company that's not willing to make a push would allow that to get in the way. So now we've done our data analytics. We know which customers, which products, which services. Then I come to the question I asked Jerry McGovern this morning. So now we have data, and we have insight into the customer, and we have thought about which products and services are appropriate. But are we contextually relevant to how we get that data or information or product or service to our customer? And I've been spending a lot of mind thought on this context of contextual relevance. Because what we know is a couple of things. That figure's a little bit old now. It's actually 80% would agree or strongly agree that I appreciate vendors who contact me with relevant and contextual information early on in my buying experience, or for that matter, search experience. Because what they want to do is they expect you to find them, know them, and delight them. Every customer has a buying journey. We know that 80% of them are digital. If you're not at the right place at the right time during their digital journey, and your customer is at the right place at the right time of their customer journey, who do you think is going to get the order? Who gets the attention? And yet what we also know is, boy, is this hard. Because whether it's customer obsession or customer delight, what we know is that plus contextual marketing relies on knowing the customer at every touch point in their journey. But then intellectually ask yourself, how do you do that? And what I have thought about, and this is the challenge I put to McGovern this morning, is serving up contextual information to the right person at the right time. And this is also important. Their way, the way they want to be sold to. Not your way, their way, right? Remember this? No, find me, know me, delight me. My way. During their buyer window. So even if we serve up the right information their way, if in their buying window we're not there when they want to learn about a home mortgage or they want to learn about a whatever, business product, then we've lost them as well. And I'd be very interested, not the purpose of today, but I'd be very interested to learn from you at the booth or during the discussion, how do you lock down contextual relevance? How do you know your customer at every touch point? How do you make sure you're serving the right information to the right person their way during their buyer window? Am I making sense to everybody? This is the challenge. This is what we're shooting for. Because when we do that, and we can then thrive in the digital deluge. You with me? Okay, which brings us all the way back, as I said, closed loop CRM to the top. And here now what we're talking about is an ability to now take the contextual relevance. We know what we should be saying to whom, and guess what? We put it in the channels that are relevant to the customer. And we listen to what the customer says, and we put it in the profile, and we do our data analytics, and we get the right thing to say their way, not our way, in the buyer window, and we send it down through the right channel. That's the second ingredient in the recipe to be successful in thriving in the digital deluge. The third and final ingredient in our recipe is that of the challenges that are brought on by what I like to refer to as the people, process, technology paradigm or mix. And I want to be very pragmatic here. We have 32 years of experience working with some of the world's greatest companies. They're very demanding customers. They do outstandingly good sales and marketing and service. But they also are fraught, as with every other company, with some of the challenges that we all face in our day-to-day jobs. So let me give you a couple of examples. And what I'm going to talk about right now is I'm going to focus heavily on the people component, which accounts for 50% of the success of your CRM initiative or your ability to thrive in the digital deluge. And I'm going to make reference to the 30% customer-facing processes that are required to thrive in the digital deluge, and 20% on the technology that helps support the processes that will drive that CRM success or digital deluge. And if you're clever, you've already added these two numbers up, and you realize that 80% of your success in CRM or social CRM or digital marketing or digital deluge has nothing to do with technology. And I'd like to prove that point with a couple of stories. So I go back to Giorgio Armani. It's a wonderful company, very interesting family. It's still owned by the family. This was 2013. That's what, 4 years ago? Maybe it was 2012. I think it was 13. So Giorgio Armani said that boys and girls, men and women, are objects of beauty. And that our job as a fashion house is to put the most beautiful clothing possible and to treat them as just, well, beautiful people. So when he, with his sales and marketing, he didn't like the online stuff. He found it cold and unfriendly. He would spend $28 for a gold emblazed brochure, not your normal one, bigger than usual, not an 8 by 11, but a big one that showed beautiful men and women and boys and girls all dressed up in these gorgeous settings, and he felt that's the way you brought beauty to an individual. Or when Mario the tailor came from Italy for the men that would buy custom suits, he didn't do that in an internet or an email or a text. He did it with another beautiful gold embossed, come visit Mario and let's make sure you look as best as you can. And he thought that was the way you should do business. Until a couple of very important things happened. One, there was a gentleman in Seattle, Washington, that went away on vacation. And he was a Giorgio Armani buyer. He was a $1 million buyer. You'd be amazed how many people spend $1 million+ with Giorgio Armani in this country. And so he really liked Giorgio Armani, and he loved those brochures, but he was on vacation, and UPS put the first sticker on his door saying, we have something to deliver to you. Remember I said it was not your standard size, it was larger, and you weren't here. We're going to try back in 2 days. And 2 days later, UPS comes, he's not there. They put another sticker on his door. And a third sticker on his door. And he finally comes back from vacation. He sees these UPS stickers on his door, and he's irate as hell. He calls up the Armani, and he said, what, are you guys crazy? I'm on vacation. You're putting an advertisement that I'm on vacation for somebody to come in and rob my house. Get smart, get real, get digital. That's what he said in his message. Armani looked at this. That's interesting. Then came the second one. It was a woman in New York City. And I'm just privy to these because I saw them all. And she sent a message to Armani and said, you're getting me in more and more trouble. Every time those beautiful, gorgeous brochures come to my house, which I love, all my husband does is say, you see, there you are spending the entire family budget. For God's sakes, could you minimize it? And she said, could you at least send me a tweet, or could you send me an email? I don't need the brochure anymore when Mario the tailor or my equivalent is coming into town. And Armani sat back with a lot of pressure from us in the United States, which is a big market for them, and said, you got to change. It was 2013 he started to email and tweet tweet some of his customers. So the concept of, is your executive team ready to listen, is a very real issue in your ability to thrive in the digital deluge. Does that make sense? Same thing happened at Kraft Foods. We did a very interesting analytical review of the southeast of the United States, kind of Georgia down to Florida, of their B2B sales through distributors. And we looked at where they were putting too much emphasis in the sales force and putting too little, and in the chains down in Florida, which were over-penetrated and under-penetrated. And we came up with some pretty interesting findings. And we presented them to a gentleman called Jim Rowe. All these people are gone because Kraft was bought by Heinz, but he was the SVP for sales, national sales. And he said, this is fantastic. I never looked at my customers this way. I'm getting insight that I never had before. We took some digital and non-digital. He said, it's wonderful. So we said, okay, Jim, when are you going to show it to Fred? Now, Fred is the president of Kraft Foods at the time, Kraft Food Service at the time, and he said, I'm not going to show it to Fred. We said, what do you mean you're not going to show it to Fred? He said, if I show this to Fred, he's going to sit me down, and he's going to say, you see, I've been telling you for 5 years you're an idiot. I'm telling you you're selling the wrong product to the wrong person at the wrong time, and here's the proof. So he said, I'm just not going to show it to Fred. So the question is, plan for executive skepticism. There's another people issue that I think is very, very important, and it should have come home already. The sales, the marketing, the customer service employee that you need to hire doesn't look like it used to look like in the 90s and 2000s, and for that matter, even the 2010s. You see, to be successful and thrive in the digital deluge, you need employees that, on the one side, are creative, and creative I mean by determining how to secure more real online and offline data coming from brand loyal customers sensitive to privacy issues. So there's the creative side, but you must have the more technical side, and that is harnessing that real-time online and offline data coming sources to deliver smarter decision-making tools. So the answer to the personnel side is not either or, but both. Now, to find those individuals increasingly difficult, although they are training them at the university. But for now, what most companies are doing is collaborating. The marketing, the sales, the service with the IT, digital specialists, and you do the collaboration. And that's a real people issue, because I can't sell if I don't know the right data analytics to get me to the right place, the right time, the right person, their way, their buying window, etc. A couple of issues on the process side. So, you know, the challenge is determining the optimal sales, marketing, and customer service processes that delight your customer at each touch point. And that should be kind of apparent, but I am always surprised at how many companies think, well, we've been doing it this way for the last 20 years, we're very profitable, it works great, what's the problem? I'll give you a real practical example. How many of you are AAA members, Automobile Association? Okay, well, there's 58 million of you, just to tell you, in the United States. And they're a little bit antiquated, in my opinion, on the whole digital side. And I worked with them for 20 plus years. And I have this conversation, and the board is split into two. One side says, hey, Bart, for the last 20 years, we've grown 1 million new members every single year at 58 million. Today, no problem. We're penetrating more customers, more products. They do something called the customer penetration. So it used to be 1.6 products per member. So it could be emergency road service and travel, or emergency road service and insurance, or emergency road. And today it's up to 2.4 or 2.6, I think. So they're saying, no problem. So they're kind of resting on the laurels. And then what's happening? Expedia, Hotwire, and all the services you use have cut the legs off of them in the travel area, because you don't go to AAA.com to book your trips, do you? So you got this challenge now between what we call customer-facing processes that delight your customer at each stage, but there's a company that can't quite put into place the processes, the customer-facing processes, the customer to AAA processes that the customer wants, because they're resting on their laurels of business has been good for 110 years. And if you look at processes in the digital world, and I just took one for marketing, so if that's the marketer, I could do this for sales or service, look at the channels you have to reach your customers. There's search, there's addressable TV, there's mobile, there's video, there's media platform, and by the way, there's 3,500 media platforms. There's data management, there's the ability and the need to measure it. There's just a whole bunch of channels you could reach your customer on. If you don't have the process in place to reach that customer, will you reach that customer? That's the process piece. On the technology side, I've already alluded to being in the know regarding these new technologies that ensure the successful realization of your delighted customer strategy. And I gave you but one example, and that was the identity resolution as a really very interesting tool to bring on and offline. I didn't get into the emerging technologies, but all of the emerging technologies are 100% digital. And as a result, we can track and listen to everything somebody says, of course, with their permission, which allows us to be more responsive and customer-focused in all that we say and do. Okay, let me sum it up. So a couple things I really want to close with. One, as I alluded to earlier on, I humbly submit there is a recipe. It consists of a strategic component to think big and get the digital deluge set up, the framework right. The second ingredient is a tactical ingredient, closed-loop CRM, 5 components that allow us to, 1, use the appropriate channels, 2, listen and gather data effectively, 3, put it inside our customer profile, 4, apply actionable data analytics, and 5, make it contextually relevant in the channel of relevance. And 3, there will be and continue to be lots of challenges. 80% of the success of any of these initiatives have to do with people and process. Don't take your eye off that people, process, technology mix. I'd like to close with a couple of observations. More data, more technology, more complexity than ever before. You need to be able to connect that data across technologies, across channels, across multiple devices. That's your job. That's what the customer expects. So I sit back and think, well, who is your company? Is it Borders? Is it Illy? Is it Amazon? Is it Coke? Who do you want to be when you grow up in the next X number of months or years? I suggest, you don't have to listen to me certainly, that you got to get the big picture right first. So think about creating a delighted customer roadmap that'll lay out for the next 2 to 5 years what you're planning to do. Channels, data, identity resolution, emerging technologies so that you can acquire your customers, retain your customers, and grow them as you expect. Prioritize roadmap activities based on your company's ability to deliver. There is no such thing as a roadmap and then march on the first phase. It depends on what your company can absorb, what it can implement realistically. And I remind you not to forget that people, process, technology mix. It tends to bite in the backside if you don't do it effectively. So, needless to say, we would be delighted to help you in any and all of this. You can carry this dialogue on in two different ways. At the booth that I alluded to earlier on, delighted to chat with you. I'm here the whole time as some of my staff, just to kind of help you think through, well, Bart, that was interesting, but I got this thing to talk about, or I got this challenge, or it does make sense. Anything we can do to try to help you. So the booth is one way. If you're going to continue on to the next session, I'm going to carry on the dialogue, but here I'm going to zero in on the core role of CRM inside that delighted customer strategy. Okay, and with that, I think this was supposed to go to 11 o'clock, is that correct? And the next section starts at 11:15. Why don't you take a 5 or 7-minute break? If you're those that have stayed, come on back in. And for those that are going, thank you very much, and I hope we'll see you again. Test 1, 2, 3, test, test. Test mic test. This is a test of the mic. Test 1, 2, 3. Okie dokie. 11:15. Welcome back. Can I find out, it'll help me understand how I should run this session. How many of you were in the prior session? Please raise your hands. And can I find out how many were not in the prior session? Please raise your hand. Okay, so I got to still address some of the newcomers with a summary before I get into this CRM. Okay, so sorry for repeating myself for those that were here, but my name is Barton Goldenberg. I was the founder of this conference back in I think it was about 2000 we founded it and chaired it for the first few years. We're delighted you're here. We're here to serve you. There's a bunch of us that have been around for a long time. All we desire is to make sure you have a relevant and good experience. Come speak to us regardless of where we are. We have plenty of time. We're all here for the conference and delighted to chat with you. So my name is Bart Goldenberg. I'm an author of 3 books. One of them I've given you as a gift to thank you for coming to today's conference. I'm a fairly well-known individual for the last 32 years, a writer. I make a lot of public speaking, and I'm just a known guy in the industry. The company that I work with, and I created that back in '85, looks at briefing you on what is CRM or social CRM, or now you'll better understand for those who are in the first part, how do we create emerging technology strategies or e-commerce strategies that integrate with social media and traditional. We're the guys that will brief you and the executive teams on the art of the possible. We'll then come back in and do an assessment. How well do you do that particular area? We'll come in and create a strategy for that area and or help you implement that strategy. That's our business. The only thing that counts at the end of the day is that whatever technology or process you use, you will have high user adoption and meaningful business impact. The rest of it is irrelevant to me. We do it with some of the world's best companies. These are on the services side. And again, as I alluded to in the first part, it's not so much that these are great companies, because they really are great companies, and we're very honored to work with them. But it's that they're always willing to spend an extra nickel to get it right and to try new things. And so it's a very nice environment in which to kind of apply thought leadership with the efforts to propel forward. And I'm going to actually use a couple of very good examples during this session about these companies that were willing to take CRM to the next level. Okay? Again, if you'd like your books autographed, or if you'd like to continue the dialogue, booth 409 downstairs. We're here the whole time of the show. You want some private time, 30 minutes, an hour, whatever you need, I'm happy to give it to you. Again, our job is to make sure you have a good conference. Okay, the topic today is thriving in the digital age for part one, and it's the core role of CRM in part two. But in order to understand part two, particularly, I'm sorry for those that are new, that weren't in part one, I just got to give you a 5-slide brief overview of part one. It's just necessary. So in part one, I said to people, we live in a world, what I'd like to call the digital deluge. It's driven by kids that are 16 to 18 years old, 86% of which are buying online today, and we're just in its infancy. So I call it the now customer. It's driven by the pocket PCs, which are known as smartphones, that 95% of all knowledge workers carry in their pocket. The digital deluge is not going away. 77% of all CEOs surveyed last year by Altimeter said that the digital transformation is their #1 strategic priority. So our job as businessmen and women is to figure out, how do I decipher which digital stuff is important to me, then gather, analyze, organize it, and capture and retain our customers who are awash in a sea of digital information that's flowing more and more all the time. And in order to do that, I suggested there was indeed a recipe to thrive in the digital deluge, consisting of 3 components. The first component was a strategic component that I'll return to in this second session, where I suggested that the job of the sales and marketing, customer service, and executive team is to pull together relevant information from transactional data, ERP, point of sales, loyalty program, CR data, sales pipeline, customer service escalation, market campaign management, third-party data, Axiom, Experion, and others that will give you data overlays. Bring those together using some of the new kind of nice tools to integrate data into a profile, which is at the critical core of every successful CRM initiative, digital strategy, etc. I introduced the tool that few are aware of called identity resolution. I work very carefully with several Silicon Valley companies on this. I humbly submit, and I'm in this for 32 years, I don't get excited very often. This stuff rocks. This is really, really good. And it's the ability to take your customer's offline behavior profile, what they bought, when they bought it, what's their email, what's their phone number, how much did they buy, with their online behavior on the social media sites, yours and others, on websites, yours and others, and on other digital tools. They come into the digital side typically anonymous. You don't know who they are until they authenticate. And what identity resolution does is once they've authenticated, like dominoes, it figures out who you are all over the web, puts together that with your offline data, and now I have a much more comprehensive and holistic profile of the customer. I suggest in the strategy side that once you have that comprehensive and seamless profile, you then apply your data analytics tools to get the right product to the right customer through the right distribution channels, or I call them customer engagement pillars. Traditional, face-to-face, telephone, email, digital, outbound surveys and so forth, focus groups, social media through private communities, very important, and public communities, and I'll talk about that in a minute. E-commerce, whether it's the websites or the portals, whether it's the search engine, whether it's the shopping cart, whether it's the next best offer, and then the emerging technologies. Most of us know the emerging technology as this little fellow right here that does us wonders through our lives, but that's really at the forefront of a wave of technology coming out of a variety of different parts of the world. It's wearables for those that are in the consumer industry. It's Internet of Things for those of us that are in the B2B industry. It's a really, really important augmented reality and virtual reality for all industries. And just to drive that point home to everybody, see what Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg announced a couple of days ago, that all of Facebook will now become augmented reality within the next 5 years. So it's a whole nother way of experiencing the digital realm. And other technologies. Addressable TV is another really good one. But the point is, we are going to now take these channels and get the right product to the right customer at the right time, their way, not your way, contextually relevant. And if we do that part right in a strategic thinking, we will drive acquisition, retention, and growth. And only the fool would try to march down the digital deluge without a plan, because it is complicated. There's lots of moving parts. As Jerry McGovern said this morning, it's not data that's relevant, it's relevant data that's important. Okay, so that's the strategy piece we talked about in the first session. The second ingredient of the recipe was that of closed-loop CRM. I alluded to the strategy then spawning off into 5 components. One was take the channels in which you work, regardless of what they may be. Get your products through those channels and start to listen by gathering relevant data, using a structured approach, because gathering data is relevant. Gathering relevant data is what we're looking for. It's not what did I think of not what everybody thought of this wonderful Marriott hotel. It's what Bart Goldenberg, Platinum Elite of Marriott, thought of the hotel, because that's actionable. And then take that data, put it inside our holistic profiles, and I'm going to come back to that in this session. Again, like a flower, put the customer or whatever it may be distributed in the middle of the flower. It's a daisy of petals of information, 12 to 18 months to create an appropriate profile. Now we have a housing place for the data in a structured manner. Apply your actionable data analytical tools. Analytics tools, there's lots of reasons why it's hard to do. It's done by best-in-class companies every day. Amazon has a pretty good understanding of what is the next best offer for you. Uber knows where you last were and what where you tend to travel. This is all done by best-in-class companies. And once we've got the understanding of what's important to you and how we need to offer our products and services, then it becomes critically important. And again, I submit, I'm challenged by this. How do we be contextually relevant to our customers? It's not the right product at the right time. That goes for granted. It's not through the right channel. That goes for granted. It's got to be the customer's way of doing business, not your way. That's already challenging. But then it's got to be during their buyer window, so when they're open to listen. So think about that again. That means your messaging, whether it's sales or marketing or customer service, has to be in that digital place that the customer happens to be searching, so that they say, oh, BOA, Bank of America, I didn't know they did mortgages. Let me click and find out more. But if BOA is not there and Wells Fargo is there, click, I go to Wells Fargo, BOA just lost an opportunity, and BOA can be marketing the heck out of their products and services. They weren't at the right place, at the right time, in the right channel during the customer's buyer window. Does that make sense? And if you are gracious enough, help me with this. It's a chapter of my book, and I'm struggling with how to make contextual relevance, how to get my hands around this. I have some thoughts. I would like yours as well. That's the second ingredient in the three-part part recipe. And the third ingredient is that of challenges. Challenges for the people, process, and technology side, that being successful and thriving in the digital deluge is not about some nifty piece of technology that's going to drive home customer satisfaction, advocacy, satisfaction, et cetera. Rather, it's 80% about thinking, what is the process we need to put into place? The customer-facing business processes outbound, the customer-facing processes inbound from customer to us that will drive this delighted customer. So that was the first part of today's discussion. The second part, I want to now go into because we're at a CRM conference, I want to go into the role, the critical role, I think I call it the core role of CRM. And, you know, I really speak around the world on many, many topics, you know, customer-facing topics. But I always come back to CRM, not because that's where I started 32 years ago, but because it is at the core of every successful CRM effort, social CRM effort, digital strategy effort. And I just want to come back to that core, and I'll take this picture and blow it up a little bit in more detail. But the message I want to pass, and I told you I'm going to build on this slide, is that little CRM fella down here, right? The CRM data. Now look at the arrows. I actually thought about this a lot. So transactional data flows into CRM. But by the way, I'm assuming for a minute that your customer of record, your master file, is based in your CRM system. Some companies have it in the ERP. I think that's a mistake. Some companies have it in the data warehouse. I think that's a mistake. I think it should be sitting right here in CRM. Why? Because as the customer makes changes, that's the system that should propagate everything else. It's the front touch. It's the touch between you and the customer. But that's just my opinion. People disagree with me. But we have transactional data that would then flow into the CRM system, and vice versa. We have third-party data that would flow into the CRM system. So now we got a rich data set sitting in the CRM system. We have pipeline management. What stage are they at? What probability of close? We have customer service information, incident escalation, first call resolution, all the stuff you do for a living. We have marketing insight. Which campaigns did they respond to? Which did they not respond to? Which channels did they use and why? All of that sits right in the CRM data set. So now we take that data set and begin to apply tools. One of them is the tool to get it into a profile. To get into a profile that gives us the total picture, as I alluded to earlier on, of the customer. That daisy that allows us to get a seamless, holistic profile. We apply it to identity resolution so we can not only bring our offline data coming from these sources into the profile, but our online data into the profile. We apply CRM absolutely to the data and listening analytics platform because the data allows us to bring product to the channels, and then we listen to how people respond to our offering. And we cut and sort and stack our CRM data to get the right segments, to target effectively to those segments. Is everybody tracking with me so far? So CRM places, and by the way, CRM, you send your CRM campaigns through traditional, social, e-commerce, emerging technologies. It's at the core of this picture. If I took out CRM data, I have, as we call it, bubka, nothing left to penetrate the customer with. So people can tell me all this highfalutin stuff of, you know, all these new names in the industry and all this new tools and all that sort of stuff. That's great. But if you don't have a successful CRM at the core, you don't have a chance to be successful in thriving in the digital deluge. So with that in mind, let me unpack what I'm talking about. First of all, everybody get this picture okay? That's where our focus is. So I got to build it up, and I'm going to use one example, just one. I don't have the time. I'm going to use the social media, this red arrow going up and down. Okay, I'm going to use that as an example to show you how CRM, why CRM is at the core role of a digital strategy, of a customer, delighted customer strategy. So let's just use that as an example. But to get you to social media, I got to bring you through a couple of things: defining CRM, defining social media, and then I'm going to define social CRM. And for those of you that are not with me very quickly today, that's what I wrote this book for. Okay, so it's all in here. You don't really have to listen to me. Hopefully, you'll read a few chapters of the book. So CRM, we go back to real core basics, 1980 stuff. It's not a technology that creates whiz-bang results. CRM is a business approach. It's a mindset. It's the way executive teams think. It says we're going to put into place good customer-facing business processes, sales processes, customer service processes, marketing processes. They're processes that go from our company to the customer. This is how we like to do business. They're processes that the customer tells us, this is how I want to do business. We put into place those good customer-facing processes. We then spend a boatload of money on people, training, communication, so that they are aware of these processes and practice these processes. I wrote an article many, many years ago called Happy Agent, Happy Customer. It was for the call centers. So when the call center agent knows the process and is rocking with it, then they're happy, and they're going to be happy with the customer. If they're overwhelmed by a process that doesn't work and the fire under their chair is burning their ass, they're not going to feel very comfortable in helping a customer that's irate and wants answers now. So we have this issue of good processes that we spend a boatload of money training people on how to use the process. And only then could we ever think about using CRM technology, the stuff you'll see on the floor, as a tool to drive efficiency into the processes that you've created that your people are ready to use. And we use this kind of little approach, it's the people process technology paradigm again, to maximize our relationships with all customers. So this is not just your end customer, it could be your distributor. Think of the Blue Cross and the Blue Shield of California picture I showed you in the first session. We had you and me, the buyer of health insurance. We had the employee group, the company I belong to. We had the producers or the brokers. That's my customer. And if I you with me? So that's what I mean by this beginning piece. I talk about a comprehensive approach, not a one-off. So CRM at our clients, I can tell you at ExxonMobil, it's I think we're in our 20th year of doing CRM with excellence. Not perfect, pretty darn good. And they've gone through, I don't remember how many iterations, but it's just the way they do it. And so it's comprehensive. It's the way sales guys and gals work, and marketing people, and service. And what they've created are those profiles that I talked about, those customer profiles, as the seamless collaboration between different customer-facing functions: sales, marketing, customer service, invoicing, finance, warehouse, whatever touches the customer. And that brings us back to this picture. And this one is an oil field services company, a B2B company. Again, just a schema, a sample profile where we have petals of information. I just again want to harp back to this. Successful CRM initiatives create profiles that are dynamic. I use the flower example because, sincerely, when you grow a flower or grow a garden, you know some of the petals die by natural cause. Information gets old or out of date, it's irrelevant. Get rid of the petal, pull it out, allow new petals to grow. So the problem with this picture, which I drew in 1988, if I remember correctly, is there was no digital petal on here, is there? So that petal, we got to add that petal in order to get the online-offline data integration. But still, this concept of seamless integration between customer-facing personnel is a critical component of every successful CRM initiative. I would go a step further. If you don't nail your customer profile, you will fail in your CRM initiative, period. There are lots of other things you need to do well. But if you don't get this one right, I don't care if all the rest of them are right, you will fail in your CRM initiative. End of story. And then last but not least in the definition of CRM is this concept that CRM increasingly leverages digital tools, all digital tools, especially the internet and increasingly social media. And again, I refer back to that Now customer that I referred to. It's just the way they do business. It's just the way they do business. And so to kind of sum up the CRM definition, not a technology, but a business approach, a mentality. Our ability to put together good customer-facing processes outbound and inbound that are customer-driven, take the time, money, and effort to train our people on using those processes effectively. And only then do we have the right to bring in the technology, CRM technology, to drive efficiencies in the processes that the people have bought into. And that's how you drive successful CRM. You use the profile as a tool to drive comprehensive and seamless understanding of the customer. So whether the customer calls sales or marketing or customer service, you don't say, oh, that's not my job, that's the sales job. Oh, that's not my job, that's the marketing job. You say, oh, I'm not working in sales, but I do see that yesterday you bought this or you're complaining about that. Let me get you on a warm transfer over to the right person. Right? Seamless collaboration. And then lastly, the use of the internet or digital tools, including the internet and social media, as a way to really attract and keep customers. That's CRM. Now we go to social media, because remember, we're going to talk about social CRM for a minute here. And as from my perspective, social media these are the online communities. I haven't quite figured out why, but a lot of people don't know that the private branded invitation-only communities are just as powerful as the public Facebook and Twitter communities. Private branded is, and I'll give you an example later on, but AAA or Kraft Foods or ExxonMobil, all of which have built private communities, we invite the customer. So not everybody can join because they don't want the competition. We talk shop. So there's a thing that when you come into a branded community, it says, is it okay if we listen to what you say and act upon it to try to help sell, market, and service you more effectively? They have to say yes. And they come in and they get peer-to-peer exchange. They get answers to their questions. But it's within an environment that the company themselves can control. So the competition's not in there. The company owns the data so they can use it. Whereas if you're on Facebook, you can't use the data, right? They own it. Or you can't use Facebook in China, so therefore you can't have a global social community, media community. There's all kinds of reasons companies have gone to private branded communities, invitation only, but lots of companies still use Facebook and Twitter communities. So online, both public and private, they allow people to get information, to get opinions, to get solutions and ratings directly from each other rather than from the company. And I need not tell you, you know this, and McGovern this morning talked about it. Somebody, rightly or wrongly, would rather listen to a colleague than to the company tell you this, what is the right thing to do. So that's the world we live in. So let's put the two sides together into something called social CRM. And that's really at the core of this book. And it's very simple. It's the intersection between social media and CRM. Not more complicated. And now let me show you exactly what I mean when I say that. So we're going to now talk, as I've alluded to, between the social media and CRM, and we're going to call that social CRM. And just as I make this example, think about the role that CRM plays in allowing this to happen as the core of allowing this to happen. We go back to that thinking again, out of focus. How can I possibly sell or market or service? And I thought about that before I wrote this book several years ago up the road in Bethesda, Maryland. And I thought of it that way, but I also thought about it this way. You see, CRM still tends to be somewhat transactional. What did we do? What did they say? It feeds in from ERP. What did they buy? When did we act? It's not totally transactional, but still transactional in nature. Social media is attitudinal in nature. How do I like doing business with your company? What do I think about your company? Do I like your sales and marketing and service people? Do you deliver on time? Do I complain? How do I feel? What's my attitude towards you? Because that's a pretty big insight into whether they're going to continue to buy from you or not. You with me? So now we're going to kind of think about this together. We put the two sides together to get to social CRM. So here's the thinking, and this is kind of at the core of the book. Step one is we create the communities. I'm using, again, social media, just that one block, that customer engagement pillar is an example of why CRM is at the core of every delighted customer strategy. So step one is your left is your private communities, public communities, and step right is your private communities. They're just listening posts, folks. I will tell you, as you'll see in a little bit later, they can deliver amazing financial results, but they should be set up principally as listening posts with a goal to help move the customer either answers to questions, down the pipeline, getting their customer issue resolved. And I'm going to go into this in a little more detail. But private and public communities is the first thing we do. And they're reasonably inexpensive today. They require some attention. The content has to be relevant. They have to be monitored to make sure people are good boys and girls and behaving themselves. You have to make sure that you're keeping the community healthy by adding new forums and taking away old forums that are irrelevant, making sure your blogs are important and so forth. But that's the first step. The second step now is to listen. These are the listening tools, and monitor and filter. So it's not, and I have a lot of discussion with Marriott on this very topic. It's not there's a value in saying more people are happy at Residence Inn this year than last year. Or, more people are finding the food at Ritz-Carlton better than it was last month. There's some relevance to that. But I can't really sell somebody on that. I can't identify you and say, I'd like to give you a steak. Because I don't know if you stayed at Ritz-Carlton and what you did. I need to get this listening down to an individual. We call it a one identifier, an identifier of offline and online information. One individual, so I can sell and market to you rather than use guys, if you know what I'm saying. Okay? That's a really important concept. A lot of people haven't quite understood the impact of that, because now you know what's going to happen. We listen, we monitor and filter the relevant stuff. We filter out the not relevant stuff, and we send it down into our customer profile. It's the same picture, but just drawn a little bit differently. It comes down into our profile. And now, thank goodness, the picture has the social media insight as a part of the flower, the petals on the flower. You with me? And if I'm doing all of this correctly, I'm now ready for my fourth step in this four-step structured methodology of how to create social CRM. I'm now ready to engage the customer through their preferred channel of engagement. Because I've listened to how they come in, I've filtered what's important, I have the holistic profile, I know what they like and where they shop, and I'm going to come out in a channel of relevance to that customer. So let me give you 4 examples of this in action. I'm going to remind you of the story that I told at Marriott Corporation, but I'm going to go a step further on it. So I told the Ritz-Carlton story, remember? Newlyweds, Ritz-Carlton, weren't happy with the room, tweeted that it was okay but not great. 4 minutes later, Marriott knew about it. 6 minutes later, front desk knew about it. 7 minutes later, they're in a new room, the tweet went back out, Ritz rocks. That's an ability to listen and think carefully at what was on a public tweet, filtered it to a particular individual, into their CRM and the front desk of the management, out with an engagement. Let me add another piece of that story. So now we talk about communities, and let's just say, and I'm one of those, what am I, a platinum elite or something with Marriott? I do a lot at Marriott. So they know me. But there's actually 2 Barts. There's Bart, the business guy, that typically likes to stay at a nice hotel, and that's either a Marriott full service or one of the, there's Renaissance and JW Marriott and Ritz-Carlton, all those type of hotels. And that's nice for a business trip. It's a good environment and you can get stuff done. But when I'm with my family and my 2 wonderful teenage kids and my wife, I'm not staying at a Ritz-Carlton. That's just a waste of money, from my perspective. And I got kids that are going to just, yell and scream anyhow, and they're going to bounce off the sofas. They just want the TV and internet access. They don't care what hotel they're in. So I'm going to stay at a Residence Inn, because then my wife and I can cook and not, spend our money foolishly at terrible restaurants all the time. So when I call Marriott, or I'm on the Marriott website, which Bart is on the Marriott website? Is it professional Bart looking for business, or is it family Bart looking for a vacation? And unless Marriott is able to decipher who I am, they could serve up entirely the wrong information to me. Do you see what I'm saying? And the question is, how do you know? Now, you could say, if I call the contact center, they might say, oh, hello, Bart, or the reservation center. Are you going on a personal trip or a professional trip? Then they send me down this route. But on social media, that might not be as obvious. ExxonMobil, I'll finish the rest of this story now. It's a very, very interesting story. They're customers of ours for 28 years, 29 years now. A wonderful, wonderful company. Very militaristic in terms of structure and organization, hierarchy. There's a certain way of doing things at ExxonMobil, and it works, and it's to be respected. But traditional, a little bit conservative. And as you would get to know me, you know that I'm not terribly conservative, and I'm a free thinker, and I always challenge my friends at ExxonMobil, the fairly senior executives, hey guys, you got to break out of this mold of how wonderful ExxonMobil is and think about, are we going to survive in 10 years' time? And about 7 years ago, I went to the executive team on the lubrication side of the business. So they make fuels that you gas, ExxonMobil gas, and they make lubricants. That's the stuff that, for example, you could put it in your car. You know it as Mobil 1, but in the factories it runs the machines so that make the parts, or it runs the wind turbines. And then there's the chemical side, ExxonMobil Chemicals, okay? I'm going to zero in on just the lubrication side of the business. And as Mobil 1 is to the cars, Mobil SHC is to the industry. It's the same molecule, it's just used on the industrial machinery inside factories. So about 7 years ago, I said, hey guys, the digital era is coming. We have to move forward with a digital approach. And they did, quite honestly, look at me like a deer in the headlights and said, and I've heard this before, what the heck are you talking about, Bart? And I said, as I kind of allude to that glass, so you have social, we have CRM, we put those in over the years, they work. But there's this emerging social animal that we have to capture and put the two together, half glass, full glass. And about 3 years ago, a little more than that, they gave us the green light to create what is called the Mobil SHC Club. It's a private branded community, and lubrication engineers are invited to belong to the community. Are there any engineers in this room? Okay, well, they tend to be, and I have a son, so I can say this, some of the most boring people I've ever in my life met. Now, I'm just half joking here. But, they are a certain way of thinking. I love my son dearly, but sometimes he's just so structured and methodological how he thinks. And he just, and so we have now about 2,400 lubrication engineers around the world, that belong to the Mobil SHC Club. They belong for 3 reasons. Number 1, peer-to-peer exchange. They have a problem with their machine, it's foaming, the refrigeration lubricant isn't keeping it cool, whatever. They can all just yak away and do their thing. 2, it's the quickest place to get an answer to a question at ExxonMobil. ExxonMobil spent billions of dollars creating field service engineers and this type of thing, and everybody loves to go to Mobil SHC Club because they get an answer either from ExxonMobil or a peer, quickly, 24/7, anywhere in the world. And number 3, they like the exclusivity that they have to be invited to belong to the club, because we're fairly careful at who gets invited. That was for the first 2 years. Last year we opened it up, quite interestingly, for reasons I'm going to explain in a minute. But we opened it up 2 languages. So in June of this year, we will have 5 languages that the club uses: Russian, Chinese, German, Spanish, and English. Why? Because those are the biggest markets for ExxonMobil lubricants in the world. I can be sitting in Beijing and type in Chinese a question that I have for the community. The Russian guy receives it in Russian. He types back in Russian, and the German guy receives it in German. So I have a total global community. Number 2, we opened it up to prospects. Now, this was a major, major deal to ExxonMobil. Initially, we only had customers and distributors because we could control the dialogue. We knew who they were. They weren't going to badmouth ExxonMobil, and they're very careful about how they do things, ExxonMobil. But we're doing it right now. The campaign is right now, and what we're doing is we're bringing prospects in as a vehicle to help kind of acclimate them to ExxonMobil and start to move them down the sales pipeline. They can ask ExxonMobil questions. They can ask peers questions. So we're using this community as a vehicle, I call it external collaboration, as a vehicle to bring the outside world into ExxonMobil. Bottom line, I can't give you the exact figures, but they're close enough. For the distributors that belong to the Mobil SHC Club, more than 50% of them have bought more product from ExxonMobil in the past year. And of the customers that belong to the Mobil SHC Club, more than 1/3 of them have bought new products as a result of belonging to the Mobil SHC Club. So the dollar value of the club is paid for itself already. But much more importantly, we have a listening post, a social listening post for what they say, and guess what happens? They say something in the community, the monitors monitor what's going on. It's actually monitored 24/7 for security reasons. And that gets pushed down into the CRM system. So within 24 hours, the sales rep, the marketing rep, the customer service person knows of this opportunity and can call upon that person and follow up and say, hey, and by the way, we're not spying, because remember what I said, when they belong to the community, one of the things was, can we use your insight to help market, sell, and service better? They had to say yes. So now I say, hey, Johnny, hey, Susie, I saw you on the Mobile SAC Club last night. You were talking about a refrigerant to stop the foaming in your machine. I don't know if you know this, but we have 3 of them, or let me give you some case studies or proof of performance sheets, and all of a sudden the dialogue is moving forward. Social CRM in action. Listening, monitoring, into CRM, engage with customer. With me? Not every company's ready for the external side of social CRM. And so Johnson Controls is one of our customers for a number of years. They've got the building efficiency side of the business. They've got the power, battery side of the business. And now they just spun out the automotive seats and interior of your car division. Okay, it's a separate company. This is for the interior of the car. And they have a fairly unique situation, Johnson Controls. Imagine a business that has, I think there's 13 customers. Maybe it's 10 now. And they're all the automotive companies. So it's General Motors and Ford and Chrysler and Mercedes-Benz. You can go around the world, and I think there's 13 of them. But you can count them on a couple of sets of hands. So this is no longer about knowing all kinds of things about my customer. It's knowing when different people in different parts of the world deal with Toyota, which is a global company, global manufacturing, and you're fitting a seat for the new Corolla, and you're fitting that seat in America and in Japan and in Germany and in Brazil, how are we dealing with that customer? So we have teams of people at Johnson Controls that are all dealing with different parts of Toyota or General Motors or anybody else, and we need to be in the know as to how everybody's working with that customer. So they have 2 issues at Johnson Controls. One was the R&D engineers, research and development engineers that designed the seats, kind of thought of the ideal seat, and the sales guys that dealt with, let's just say Chrysler or General Motors or Toyota, had a very different perspective of what the customer could afford. And the 2 sides, R&D and sales, were not on the same page. The second issue is we have global teams, global customers, all 13 customers are global, that don't necessarily talk to each other. So we have a problem, and it's, the American perspective is no better than the German perspective, no better than the Japanese perspective or the Brazilian perspective. They're all important. We got to work together as one global team. And they didn't have the tool to do it. They used the community initially as an internalist block. They talked to each other. They created threads about new cars and I don't know, I've seen them all, but lots of different things along the chain of buying or servicing a customer. And they took that information and brought it down inside their this is the equivalent of a CRM because they had threads. General Motors, Ford, Infiniti, Subaru, and they just went piece by piece. And then inside that, the different models. And they set this up and they started to make discussions, and that was fed into the customer profile at the CRM level. So here's an example of using these social communities as a vehicle to get your own act together internally, and then use that information to go back out through CRM to deal with the customer. The last one I want to share with you is Kraft Foods. Again, I'll tell you that story in a little more detail. But this is the whole customer engagement piece of the social media. And you got to think about this. This is quite complicated. So Kraft Foods sells, let's just take mac and cheese, okay? You know it? They don't sell it to the restaurant, and they don't sell it to the local supermarket or the stores. They sell it through distributors. And you know who those distributors are. You've seen the trucks on the road. It says Sysco, S-Y-S-C-O. It says U.S. Food. It says Gordon's, depends on what part of the country you live, but they're very well-known distributors. Why? They refrigerate everything, or they deal in the business day-to-day of stopping in every restaurant, stopping in every store and seeing what they need. That's not Kraft's business. So here was the situation where Kraft was selling through, let's just say Sysco, mac and cheese. And they were selling it for about $17 a box. The markup for the distributor and so forth, it came out to $20 to the consumer, to the restaurant or to the hotel, or I'm going to, by the way, stick to the food service side for a minute, not the supermarket. So it came out at the food service side, the hotel, the park, the prison, the internal cafeteria, $20 for the case. Sysco sat back and said, well, wait a minute. This is mac and cheese. I buy it for $17, I sell it for $20. If I made the mac and cheese myself and I could produce it for $12, and I sold it for $18, I'd be cheaper than mac and cheese 20 versus 18, and my margin would be 6 between 12 and 18 rather than 3 between 17 and 20. You with me? So I think I'll build Sysco mac and cheese. And you as a consumer, if we had mac and cheese at lunch today, would you know it's, oh, I'm sorry, this is not Kraft mac and cheese. This is Sysco mac and cheese. You probably wouldn't know the difference. So now we're Kraft at corporate headquarters in Glenview, Illinois, sitting around a table thinking, our distributor has just become our chief competitor. So what do? Well, there's always the customer that makes the final decision. So you can't say to Sysco, bugger off, we don't like you, because they do deliver the food cold, hot, and so forth. But you can go to the end customer and create a community, a social media community, invite them to talk about, in this particular case, it was called Craftworks. You had two doors into the community. One was for the chefs that talk shop about, what's the best tasting ingredients and how to use mac and cheese and how can you be creative and, And the other one was for the business owners, the restaurant owners that would say what a best practice is for getting people in and changing tastes in the region and so forth so that you could optimize your efficiency at the restaurant. And what Kraft did is they said, on the community, they invited them. Of course, they now had a name and an address. If they joined in a private community, this was private, a name, address, and email. So we could go back out and do first level market research with them. But we did something else clever. We took a $3 or a $5 sticker and put it on the outside of the case or inside the case. And we said to the customer, when you receive this at 20 bucks, open it up and there's $7 inside for you, which brought it below the price of Sysco. But you have to sign up on the database and tell us all the information about you. So we created a very rich customer database from which we could then go out and do direct marketing and direct selling. And instead of pushing the product down through the distribution channel, Sysco, we could have the customer pull the product down through the distribution channel. Is everybody with me? And that was because of a social community where we're able to engage the customer, in this case the consumer, to work directly with us. And now we're trying to work, three of us together, Kraft, Sysco, and the customer. But Sysco's not stupid. They know what margins look like. Okay, so let's try and bring this together, and then I want to open this to Q&A. I used as an example the importance of social media, whether it's internal or external, whether it's with your partners or whether it's just listening like Marriott, as a vehicle to show you that CRM, the database, the data source, the ability to get back out through the engagement channels is a critical component of the delighted customer strategy, of every successful CRM initiative, social CRM initiative. It's really, really important. It's really, really important. And it makes me make a couple of conclusions. Number one, a solid CRM system is at the core for every component that is utilized within the delighted customer strategy. So what does that tell you as smart people? It's imperative that your existing system be in place and be optimized. Because you can't get here unless your CRM system is there. Now, I could have this discussion 10 years ago and say, let me show you how to get a CRM system. But best-in-class companies are way beyond that. They have an effective CRM system in place. And if you don't have one in place, really, talk to me or talk to the industry. We'll get you one in place. We're way beyond that in the industry. We're way beyond that in the industry. The CRM systems work, folks. It's the people and process that don't work. There's nothing wrong with the technology. I promise you it works. Promise. It's the way you've understood your company and where it should be applied as sales or marketing service, which power kingdoms and all the bullshit that goes on. But the technology works. So you've got to navigate that people process technology paradigm so that your CRM system is in place and it's optimized. Because now you can understand if it's not optimized, you can't rock here. And if you can't rock there, you become a Borders. You become an Illy. You don't become an Amazon. You don't become a Coke. You with me? I think I made one other point. Act now to enhance your organization. Yeah, I really have been doing this for 32 years, and I've chaired all these conferences and started them all and for many different places. And I remember I used to say, folks, now's the time to put the stakes in the ground for your CRM system. I'm serious. I did that in the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s. Okay? You put the stakes in the ground, you let it fail if that's the worst case scenario, you learn from it and you move on. But you got to put the stakes in the ground and try to optimize it. Does that make sense? It's really, really important. Okay, so what I wanted to do, again, we would be honored if you'd like to come down to the booth and further discuss this. But I wanted to really take the time, and I think I do, yes I do, just a bit, to open this up to Q&A. So why don't you, I'd very much appreciate some feedback and any questions you may have. Who would like to be the brave soul that asks the first question? Yes?
You mentioned technology. What types of technologies do you work with on CRM? Are you more CRM, Microsoft, or Salesforce?
So John Chan, who's in the room, heads up my software laboratory. In 1989, we started to test software. We test, I don't know the number anymore, but let's just say between probably about 60 software packages. We write them up in a review, apples for apples, so we same criteria, and we judge what makes sense. I want to answer your question a little differently. The extreme majority of softwares work today. There's nothing wrong with the technology. Some are got this functionality that others don't have. Some are more, some are artificial intelligence, some are not. I mean, what you need to ask yourself to be successful in CRM is, what business functions am I trying to accomplish? Is it moving sales opportunities down the pipeline more quickly? Is it creating first call resolution that is quicker than before? Is it reaching targeted audiences more effectively through their distribution channels of choice? And once you have that list of what I call prioritized business functions, you might also look at your technical environment. How do you work today, and how much of it invested or flexible? Only then could you ever consider what vendor is the best for me. So you don't start with, is Salesforce better than Microsoft CRM or vice versa? Because that's, excuse my observation, plain old stupid. You couldn't make a more stupid mistake. What you start with is a prioritized list of business functions that will allow your company to excel and propel in the future. You work those out and make sure that the processes are right behind that the people have bought into it. Now you're getting the company ready, right? People, process, technology. Then you come to a company like ours or anybody else and say, listen, here's the prioritized business function. If you can't do that, we'll show you how to create the prioritized business function through super users and getting people involved that actually make decisions, top-down, bottom-up decision making. And you get that list of prioritized business functions, and then it's really easy to write an RFP. It's really easy to find out which vendors might work. And then you just have them fight with each other to get the best price. It's that simple. But where do people make the mistake? They fail to get the prioritized business functions in place, or they're told, on the golf course, I decided we're using Salesforce, so just make it work. Or, there's 100 reasons. Now, I've had the pleasure of working with all these opportunities. You got Salesforce, I'll tell you how to use Salesforce effectively. You got Microsoft, I'll tell you how to use Microsoft. You got Greenfield and you're really looking to get a better CRM system, let's start with prioritized business functions. We have a very structured methodology that says, executives, where do you want to take the company, how does CRM support it? Belly of the beast, people that work for a living, sales, marketing, customer service, what is it that troubles you every day when you do your job? If I can solve those operational issues and get the top-down strategy and over time bring that together in a phased CRM implementation, I'm going to win, provided my processes are sound and I've taken the time to get the people. So to answer your question, they all work just fine. You tell me why, what prioritized business function we have, then I'll tell you what software works best. Does that make sense? Yes? And by the way, you are all, you can leave, it's 12 o'clock. I think this might be over, but I'm going to go on until questions kind of wither out.
So at the keynote session this morning, Jerry talked about measure consumption, not production. Can you help us connect the dots between how CRMs can help measure consumption versus production? This seems like streamlining the internal house, which I agree with you, is well needed. But how do we bring that consumption aspect into your story?
So I'm going to answer that, and that's a good question, by the way. And I have to tell you, I really enjoyed what Jerry McGovern said. I didn't always necessarily agree with everything he said. That's the only problem. I'm sorry. I'm just a professional, and I didn't always agree. So this is the listening tool, right? In this case, the social media community. But if I went to this picture, well, any of these. I just want to go back to this one right here. Anytime I launch an initiative in any one of these, see what that says? It says listening and data analytics platform. So that it's the listening tool that allows me to listen to consumption. I am producing. That's rubbish that it should only be on consumption and not production. That's rubbish. You know, Nike's a customer of mine. It was 2003. I was in Beaverton, Oregon at the bar with Phil Knight. And I remember telling him, sir, the customers don't like the service we give. And we're 17 out of 17 for the retail stores. We're at the bottom of the pits, and they were at $13 billion ceiling, and we got to be more customer sensitive. And I'll never forget Phil Knight slams his hand down in this big